Hello, everybody. How's it going? Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Alan Greenlee, the Executive Director of the Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing, here today to do a town hall to talk a little bit about the United to House LA ballot initiative for the city of Los Angeles. We're going to spend the next hour chatting a little bit about what the initiative is and what people on the line today can do to help support. We'll have a session for questions and answers. Would ask that you put your questions down in the Q&A box, and we'll try to address them as we go through the agenda. Certainly you can put them in anytime you'd like. Our conversation today is broken up into a handful of sections. We're going to talk a little bit about the context that we find ourselves in today and why we think that this is the right time to run an initiative like this. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the, we'll talk about actually what the initiative does. And Laura Raymond from ACT LA is going to talk a little bit about that. And then Robin Hughes from Abode Communities is going to talk a little bit about what this means for SCANPH members, affordable housing development in the city. After that, Ariana Jukes from our office is going to talk about some of the communications and messaging strategies that we are developing and have in place already. And then we're going to talk lastly about how you can get involved. This is a real opportunity that we need everybody's help on. And so towards the end, we'll talk about ways that you can be a substantive partner with us immediately. There's some things you can do right away, and then there's some things we'll need your help on as we go through the year and as we get farther down the road on the campaign. I think with that, let's talk a little bit about the situation of where we're at today. Many of these statistics are things that we all know very well. But we're talking about a place, Los Angeles in particular, where the scarcity of housing has created the opportunity for some people to benefit in extraordinary ways. And you see there that the average equity gain across the country is about almost $57,000, whereas in California alone, it's about $116,000. So there's this incredible inequity as it relates to how people who are currently well off continue to be better well off. And then that juxtaposed with our homeless numbers that you're all familiar with. So the question is, how is what we're talking about today going to address that inequity? And why is this a really important time to do this? So what we're talking about doing is assessing a transfer fee on real estate assets that are of extraordinary value. Actually asking those who have benefited the most from the scarcity, particularly of residential real estate, to contribute their fair share to the overall solution. This is an opportunity for us to put something significant on the ballot that creates an ongoing and significant revenue source. I think an important thing to remember right this very minute is that we're aiming for the November 2022 ballot. And the reason we're doing that is for at least three reasons. One is because we need it. The second thing is that because of a series of California Supreme Court decisions in the last few years, it is currently the law of the state that a petition-driven tax initiative only has to pass at the ballot by a simple majority. And so we're just talking about having to pass an initiative by 50+1 instead of a 2/3 majority. The second reason why this is a special moment in time is because the number of signatures that you need to be able to get an initiative on the ballot are tied to the most recent mayoral election. And as you'll recall, we had our last mayoral election in an odd year. It's the last year in the city of Los Angeles where the mayoral election will be happening in an odd year. And as a result, there are a relatively low number of signatures necessary to get onto the ballot. There are a handful of reasons why this is beneficial to SCANPH members. And here they are. One is we're talking about raising about $875 million a year. And this is based on sales recorded actually the year before the pandemic, so 2019. It creates, as I mentioned before, a consistent and permanent source of funds. And those of you who are in the business of affordable housing development know how important it is for forward forecasting to be able to understand to know that that money is available, that certainty gives you some hedge against the risk associated with taking on the heavy work of pre-development. All right, so now I'm going to turn the floor over to Laura Raymond from ACT LA and ask her to talk a little bit about the details of the measure. Laura?
Yes, thank you, Alan. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks for joining today. So the details of the measure. Well, first I wanted to start by just saying that many of you, me, many of our partners working on housing and tenant protections, we spend a lot of time, in the details of how these things are rolling out, identifying where we need new program, where we need more funding, where we need new policies. And a lot of that brings us to a very similar space of, okay, we need revenue for this. And so what this opportunity is really, it's a collection of years of thinking through what we need revenue for and bringing that together with this opportunity for a major revenue source. So the major revenue source is this two-tier assessment at the point of sale for high value properties, a real estate transfer tax, a real estate transfer fee. And it will only affect properties over $5 million. It's applied to both commercial and residential. It's a 4% fee on properties between 5 million and 10 million. And it's a 5.5% fee on properties over 10 million. So that is the fee. And what will it fund? So the House LA ballot measure is broken, it's kind of got these two pots you can think about. There's one, 70% goes into preservation and construction of existing affordable housing and new supportive housing. And I'll break that down a little bit more, that 70% pot. So we've got 22.5% of that going towards supportive and affordable housing that can be used in conjunction with things like the LIHTC program, other federal, state, and local affordable housing funding sources. Another 22.5% for a new alternative model, or alternative models. This can look in multiple different ways for permanent affordable housing. That can include construction, acquisition, rehabilitation, lease, preservation, and operation of rental and mixed rental homeowner projects. And then 10% for preservation. So money to acquire, preserve, rehabilitate, lease, operate existing multifamily rental housing property. It can go to residential hotels, ADUs, junior dwelling units, and then 10% as well for single family and cooperative homeownership opportunities. And then we have 5% set aside for a stabilization fund and that is in place for any revenue shortfalls we might see in any given year to make sure that programs are not, facing a revenue shortfall and have to lay off staff or things like that. The 30% pot, so this is what we're calling homelessness prevention and tenant support. That's broken down in a few ways as well. 5% will provide short-term emergency funding to tenants for rental assistance, tenants at risk of becoming homeless. 10% will go to income assistance for rent-burdened seniors and or people with disabilities who are at risk of becoming homeless. 10% will go towards funding for eviction prevention and defense. So what a lot of people talk about is the right to counsel. This will fully fund that program. And then as well, there's dollars for providing tenant outreach, education, and navigation services. And then very importantly, dollars to monitor and enforce city protections against tenant harassment. As many folks know, we've had some success with tenant anti-harassment ordinances, but there's not enough funding to actually enforce those protections for tenants. And so that is a breakdown of those two funding sources. Roughly what will the outcomes be? This would create 26,000 homes over the next decade, reaching 69,000 people. It's over 10 years, but again, this funding source will be permanent until voters decide to take it away. And so this is just the first 10 years. And then every year, 475,000 renters will be served by the Homelessness Prevention and Tenant Support Program. So those are the outcomes. Also, we want to point out that this has the most robust citizens oversight and transparency mechanism in LA City history, a paid Citizens Oversight Committee with specific expertise on the issues of housing and lived experience with homelessness will be appointed by the mayor. We'll have a professional staff that's also going to be funded through the measure that will report to the Citizens Oversight Committee, and that will be led by an inspector general, which will be funded through this. I forgot to mention, but before we go into those two pots, actually 8% of the dollars will go towards this like oversight, implementation, accountability mechanisms, because we wanted the city to have those resources to be able to actually make this program that we all believe it will be. And also wanted to point out that there's some ability to, as we see new opportunities, there are some mechanisms in there to have some flexible funding, but there's also limited ability for city council to change any of the eligible uses of the funding. So we wanted to strike that balance between, if there's a good opportunity, but you're limiting the ability of the city council to change kind of the outcomes of this measure that voters want to see. Am I on this slide as well? Oh, okay, sorry about that. Okay, I'm keeping going. Okay, so who's involved in this? We've got a labor community coalition. So SCANPH, of course, ACT LA, Kiwa, SAGE, IBW Local 11, the building trades, Move LA, Unite Here, and LA Can are all on the steering committee. And we're every day we're growing. We actually have over 80 endorsements so far. If you have not had, if you're with an organization, you haven't had an opportunity to endorse, you can visit the website and endorse. But yeah, we have a very broad coalition with a lot of expertise that is really excited to be working together to make this happen.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Laura. I think what we want to do now is hand over the mic to Robin Hughes, who's going to talk a little bit about why this initiative is interesting to her personally, but also to an organization like Abode Communities. Robin?
Thank you, Alan. And again, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robin Hughes. As Alan said, I'm the president and CEO of Abode Communities. And, I always think about and remember our origins as an organization, and it is here in the city of Los Angeles. And that's why our work in the city of LA has been so critical. So today, after doing affordable housing production for about 3 decades now, Abode Communities is an architect, developer, owner, operator, and service provider of affordable housing. Primarily, our existing portfolio is in the County of Los Angeles, with about half of our units in the city of Los Angeles. So we have 45 communities in operation today. That's just over 3,000 units serving about 9,000 residents. And what I always think is really interesting is when I look at who we serve and how important that is to our work. So we've always had a long-term commitment to serving families. So about 71% of our existing portfolio is for families. And then our supportive housing portfolio has grown, but the existing operations is about 20%. But when I look at the affordability level, about half of our portfolio is serving extremely low income households. And so that continues to be an important priority for Abode Communities as an organization. Our residents are people of color, with Latinos and African-American making up the largest percentage. And the reason I talk about these statistics, because I think it's the importance of having a resource like this measure to continue to support the population. In terms of our current pipeline, the thing that we've seen over the last 3 years is that we've grown as an organization geographically, as well as the depth of our pipeline. So within the next 3 to 5 years, Abode Communities will almost double the number of units in our pipeline. So we have 23 properties, just over 1,200 units, and a nice balance between 51% is family affordable, but we now have about 50% of our portfolio that is supportive housing, so a significant increase in our pipeline. The other thing that's different for us now than maybe 3 years ago is where we're working. We've had a really strong commitment to LA City and LA County, but because of the limited resources here, we've had to expand geographically. So, I'm excited to say that we're now working in 8 different counties here in Southern California, as well as Northern California. But 50% of our pipeline is still here in the city of Los Angeles. So that just really shows how critical it is to continue to support funding in the city. So there are many reasons, as Alan has pointed out, why we should support this measure and how this measure is going to support our work. And the biggest one I'd like to emphasize is the lack of capital that we have to support the production of affordable and supportive housing in the city of Los Angeles. I've now been at the table for decades talking about a permanent dedicated source of funding for the city of Los Angeles. I know probably 20 years ago, we had the first Housing for Stronger LA when the Housing Trust Fund was created, but I don't know that we ever got to that $100 million number. If we did, it definitely hasn't been there of late. We all know that HHH is very close to being completely committed, and there's not another stream of funding coming from for the city. And probably the biggest challenge we have with our supportive housing pipeline right now is just the lack of rental subsidy to help reach that deep affordability that we're trying to achieve within our housing. So we've waited a really, really long time for the city and our elected officials and decision makers to come up with a substantial dedicated source of funding to address housing affordability and homelessness here in our city through housing production. This ballot initiative does exactly that. It will provide deep long-term investment into the production of affordable and supportive housing, the type of work that we all do in this space, and it will help us to close that gap. I think that the city of LA needs about just over 500,000 units just to serve current low-income renters. So this funding will help us begin to close that gap. And for us as an organization, for other SCANPH nonprofit developer, to continue to help us close that housing cost gap so we can serve extremely low income people. It will definitely cover that construction cost gap that makes it affordable again. Very deep and long-term affordability is critically important. And while I kind of hate to say this, it will help us leverage other dollars. So, it will help us leverage those state dollars and federal dollars that are out there that are very, very competitive. And, for organizations, and I know there are a number of out there where we have, these really deep pipelines that we're relying to go through the city's managed pipeline right now This will give us greater certainty, as Alan mentioned, about projects actually getting funding. So we're willing to make that investment, that risk into early pre-development costs. So, the why at this moment, we know that our affordable housing and homeless crises are, they're linked to one another. If we're not producing more affordable housing, unfortunately, what that means that more and more people are slipping into homelessness or housing instability because we're just not producing more. And, as pointed out, this funding source will ensure that we're closing that gap between the housing needs and the housing available here in Los Angeles. As a developer, I'm really pleased with the coalition that has come together to craft this initiative, and it's really great that we collectively were at the table in crafting this initiative. And they're experts who know and understand our business. So it was crafted in a way that we can actually utilize the funds for things that we are working on currently, but also think about innovative and different ways of doing our work. And I just want to do a little bit of a shout out to our own Laura Regas, who was around the table and working on this initiative. So from a Bode community standpoint, we always see ourselves as part of finding solutions and being part of the advocacy work to get more resources into our affordable housing production, but into Los Angeles, into Los Angelenos who need affordable housing. So we are supporting the measure in a few ways. One, we have endorsed the measure, which is great. But we've also made a financial contribution to the campaign. And I'm sure Alan will do that ask later on. But this only works if we're putting our financial resources into making it happen. The other thing is Alan has attended a town hall that we did for our own staff to engage and inform them about the initiative and ask them to sign on to the petition to get the ballot, to get the measure onto the ballot. We will do voter education and civic engagement with our residents as well to both, have them sign on to the petition, but also just get out there and vote. Their vote really matters in all of this. And we'll continue to engage our board and staff to volunteer as the campaign moves on. So it's an organizational commitment that we're making, yes, to support our work, but more importantly, so that we can deliver on our mission. So I hope that all of you out in the audience will find a way to support this measure today as well. So thank you so much, Alan.
Thanks, Robin. And as you started to speak, my mother's voice spoke to me in the back of my mind and said, you have not been exercised your responsibility to be polite. And I didn't take the moment to introduce you properly. And I apologize to make you have made you do that yourself. The other thing is that this will happen as many times as you and I are in the same room for the next year. And that is, I want to, on behalf of SCANPH and our membership, express our appreciation, collective appreciation, my personal appreciation for the tremendous work and leadership that you provided at both communities. And the city of LA is better off today because of your service. And we're going to miss you. And but we have every confidence that you're going to help that transition.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you so much. Got some shout outs in the chat now.
Yeah. So actually in the chat, so there's a handful of things I just want to sort of mention. In the chat, Jeanette posted the link to the endorsement form. So if you haven't endorsed yet, please go ahead and do that. The leverage number, as you all know, for every local dollar that goes into a housing credit deal, there's another $4 that come from someplace else, and there's nothing like other people's money. The other thing, just on the order of magnitude to remember, is I was in New York during the holidays. It was the end of the Bloomberg administration, and in the 8 years that he was in office, they built 200,000 affordable units. And one of the ways they did that was with an ongoing and annual commitment of $1 billion a year. And so, the 150 or so $1 million that the city spends on affordable housing is about $850 million less than what the city of New York spends. And so we're never going to get there unless we make the investment. Thanks for Jeanette for putting that back, the link back up. Oh, and then the last thing is just want to make sure on your shout out to Laura Regas, a SCANPH board member and the chair of our policy committee. So continued good work and contributions from the folks at Abode Communities. So our next subject matter area is to talk about key campaign messaging and what we expect will happen once our initiative qualifies, and those who don't support what we're talking about, how we think that they're going to behave. And in order to talk about that, I'm inviting Ariana Jukes from our office to talk about that. Ariana?
Thanks, Alan. So yeah, key messaging. In order to know how to message this campaign, it's important to know what the environment looks like. So it's no surprise that 95% of Angelenos say that homelessness is the most pressing issue to them. I mean, we interact with it daily. What is interesting are some of the findings from the Committee for Greater LA Focus Group on voter sentiments towards homelessness in LA. And what they found was that Angelenos have a lot of empathy for the unhoused. They also understand that long-term solutions are needed, and they look towards nonprofit and CBOs to lead the way in doing so effectively. So how does this impact our messaging? Well, for starters, those same trusted messengers are the ones who wrote this ballot measure. So this is a citizens-led ballot measure that was written by non-for-profit homelessness and housing experts. Who benefits from it? This is where that empathy aspect comes in. All renters and 97% of homeowners would pay nothing for this ballot measure, but everyone would benefit from it. In particular, low-income households, seniors, those with disabilities, veterans, and other at-risk groups. This is meant to really target the folks who are in the lowest economic bracket as well, to make sure that they feel supported and have housing. Who foots the bill? So this initiative will be paid for by millionaires and billionaires. And that's something that's really important to recognize, is that the high income earners are the ones who would be helping close this equity gap. Who's in support? This goes back to those trusted messengers. As Laura had said, we actually have over 80 endorsements, and we'll keep pushing this out more and more, but a lot of folks are on board that have expertise in this area. And that's why we are going to invite you to endorse as well. Now, some of the opposition that we are anticipating. For starters, there's going to be resistance to adding more money towards affordable housing. Folks have hesitancy around HHH, and one thing that's important to note, that while HHH has in fact gone folks off the streets, as Alan and everyone was saying, there's great investments made. The 1-to-4 ratio is really helpful in terms of getting other investments for nonprofit developers. But this is different than HHH in that it builds on the lessons learned from HHH. There's a funding for an innovation pot. It's a consistent fund. There's funding for traditional lower income tax credits. So there's a lot that was learned, and that's been included in this ballot measure. We also anticipate that there's going to be folks who just don't trust the city council or trust city officials, and that there's a fear of misuse of funds. But as was mentioned, that there's language locked in that prevents city council from changing where the funding is going to. And 2, there's those strong accountability measures. And then finally, there's going to be opposition from the usual suspects. So the the wealthier homeowners, real estate, anti-tax, anti-government folks. But what's important is that we have a lot of opportunities to engage folks that are liberal leaning, homeowners or moderates, and those who just believe in our vision. So the timeline that we're working with, as was mentioned, we're in the ballot or the signature gathering phase, with our first deadline coming up of April 23rd as the campaign finance first filing deadline, which is to show that we have actually the money to push this thing through. And then by April 27th, we have to have 65,000 ballot signatures on the ballot for it to qualify. After it qualifies, we then move into the campaign phase, and hopefully we will be all excited on November 8th when this passes, which is the voting day. So how can you get involved? One of the main ways is spreading the word about this campaign. So here's the website. I know it's been posted in the chat. We're adding it in again. But here's where you can find communication tools such as digital toolkits and the endorsement form and our links to our different accounts that we believe you should follow on Twitter and Instagram, etc. And keep in mind that we will have more materials are being drafted to be shared with you. And with that, I'm actually going to pass it back to Alan to talk about other ways to participate in this process.
Thanks, Ariana. So I think the biggest one, well, there's two things. We'll talk about both, but one of the big ones is, campaigns cost money. And so we need funding, not only to get onto the ballot. If we don't get the 65,000 signatures by the 27th of April, we don't get on the ballot. And then once we get on the ballot, we anticipate that we're going to get outspent significantly by those who see themselves paying the fee. And so the way I like to talk about this is that you should, whether it's organizationally or individually, you should give till it hurts and then give a little bit more. So some of you are already on my list to hit up, but you'll see there that we've been able to talk with half a dozen developers who've been willing to commit $25,000 each, which is a great contribution. And so we've invited TAKAO SUZUKI from the Little Tokyo Service Center, who's one of those organizations, to talk a little bit about, why it is that LTSC has chosen to participate. Tak?
Thank you, Alan. Little Tokyo Service Center is a 42-year-old social service and community development organization. I'm the director of community development here at LTSC, and I spent, I guess, half the life of LTSC, doing this work. We started out as a social service organization, and as an outgrowth of the services work and the high need, we became a community development corporation in the early 1990s. And since then, we've developed and own over 1,000 units of affordable housing, and that serves families, seniors, transition age youth, survivors of domestic violence, formerly unhoused individuals. And currently we have over 600 units of permanent supportive housing and affordable housing in our pipeline. Annually, in addition to our residents, our organization serves about 10,000 individuals. And the biggest requests for assistance we receive is housing related. And mainly the request is is helping them secure an affordable place to live. Little Tokyo Service Center, we're really proud to be an early supporter of the United to House LA campaign. And the reason we did so on this initiative is because we really believe that this is our opportunity to create a permanent local source for affordable housing. As Robin mentioned, discussion and talks about creating a local source of funding has been discussed, for years and decades. And, for us, our organization, we really believe that this is an all-in moment for not just our organization and not just the housing industry, but really an all-in moment for the city of LA, to take the major step towards alleviating the housing crisis. And I think, people here, as well as the endorsers and supporters, we really feel that this is our best chance for the city to create this funding source. And, and simply put, we feel that this will be a moral failing on our end if we don't seize this opportunity. The signature deadline is coming up soon, as you saw on the previous slide. And once we're able to collect the signatures needed to get this initiative on the ballot, as mentioned earlier, it's only going to take a simple majority to create this local permanent source and sustain this source of funding, for the long term. This funding is going to support the missions of not just our organization, but the missions of our collective organizations, and it will allow us to continue to do the work that we do every day. We're one of many nonprofit developers in the SCANPH membership who's made an early contribution to support the campaign. And just as a reminder, nonprofits, so 501c3 organizations are allowed to make campaign donations on ballot measures. So really, I think my pitch to you today, and I think I might be preaching to the choir a bit, but if your organization can support the campaign, please consider making this contribution. It really does take a village, and we say this a lot, but in this case, it really does take a village to pass an effort like this, and we really need all of your support. So along with your support that you could provide in any amount, we strongly urge all of you to spread the word. And Jeanette has posted a link on the to the campaign website. But please feel free to contact myself or others on this town hall today if you have any other questions or concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, Talk. Really appreciate it. One of the things that's happening with the Little Tokyo Service Center is that they're opening the Budokan community space, next weekend? Is that right? And yeah, go ahead. Talk if you want to make a pitch.
Yeah, so it's a multi-day event, but the larger grand opening event is going to happen pretty much all day Saturday. So if you are around town, there will be activities, throughout the day, for your families and whatnot. So please come on by. I could post the link in the chat.
Great, please do. But one of the things that is happening at that event is that there will be a table, and they'll be circulating folks with petitions. And so as we've been having conversations with our members about how they can support the petition drive, I've been thinking of it in kind of two ways. One is what I call the friends and family strategy, to what extent that each of us as staff members can either work with people that we know or people that we work with to encourage signatures from City of LA registered voters. And then the second way is to work within buildings to talk to the residents there and see if they're interested in signing a petition to put an initiative like this on the ballot. And so we've invited for this next section James Hacedo from our office and Chris Bowen, who are leading the effort on organizing the petition drive. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to them to talk a little bit about how organizations on the line can get involved in that effort.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Alan, and to all the other speakers who have gone before us. Again, my name is Chris Bowen. I am the public policy organizer at SCANPH. And, as others have said, we are fighting to achieve greater housing equity in our society. It's a very noble goal. But the question is, what is the objective at hand? Or as the kids say these days, do we understand the assignment? And so this is the assignment. We are going to gather 65,000 signatures. Every initiative in the city of Los Angeles requires signatures to qualify for the ballot. The number of signatures required to qualify is based on a simple formula. It's 15% of the total number of voters that cast their ballot for the office of mayor. So in 2017, there was actually 431,896 votes cast for mayor. 15% of that number is 64,785. We're rounding up to 65,000. That's the total amount of signatures our coalition will need to qualify our initiative for the ballot. You might be thinking to yourself, wow, that's a lot of signatures. Yes, that's true. Most of those signatures are going to be gathered by our paid signature gathering organization, but the volunteer portion of this signature gathering effort is very important, and that's where you all will be coming in. And so The volunteer portion is really aiming to collect about 6,000 signatures. SCANPH is planning on collecting about 1,000 of those. Maybe the next slide. And so you can see right there, that's kind of the overview. And how has it been going along? And that would be the next slide. Since our initiative petition has been verified by the city clerk a couple of weeks ago, our team has sprung into action. Currently, the paid coalition is gathering signatures of a rate of about 2,000 a day. Our organization, the volunteer operation, is gathering signatures dozens by the day. And I'm going to be turning it over to my colleague, James Salcedo, who is going to outline exactly how the different organizations within SCANPH and how anyone who is tuning in today might be able to support our signature gathering effort. So without further ado, I will turn it over to my colleague, James Salcedo.
All right, thank you, Chris, and hello, everyone. My name is James Salcedo, member along with Chris and Alan of the SCANPH staff and Ariana. So as you heard, we're working toward collecting 65,000 signatures from registered voters across the city of LA in order to qualify our initiative for the November general election ballot. Helping us get there is a major piece of where we'd like you to step in as SCANPH members, and here's how you can help. So we believe that the biggest reserve of voters and potential petition signers in the SCANPH community will come from residents of affordable housing. And that's why reaching them is one of our top asks of our member organizations at this stage of the campaign. We know through public data that there are more than 30,000 units of subsidized affordable housing in the city of LA that are owned and managed by SCANPH member organizations. So we'd like to be able to engage with them, inform them about the ballot initiative, and ask them to sign our petition, and also hope that they'll choose to become an active part of this base of support that we're building as part of this initial stage of the campaign. There are a lot of ways that we can go about this, and we're always interested in your perspective on the ways that would make most sense to reach your residents, right? Given that you've got the ongoing relationship with them. But options would include hanging posters in your communities to inform them of the ballot initiative, and so that they've already heard about it before anybody asks them to sign a petition. When it comes to actually collecting signatures, SCANPH staff can train members of your staff to collect signatures from residents. That's the approach our members at Little Tokyo Service Center are taking as they make plans to engage with their residents on this next week. SCANPH staff are also available to visit your housing communities and collect signatures ourselves. That's the approach that we took with members at a community of friends, which welcomed us to engage and collect signatures from residents in their Koreatown properties last weekend. We can also do this by setting up a table in a lobby or a community room, other common space in your properties. We can do this by taking a list of registered voters and knocking just on the doors where there are registered voters in the homes within your communities. And in any case, flyers, petitions, other supporting materials are all ready to be picked up every weekday at our campaign hub near downtown LA. And SCANPH staff are also available to bring those materials to you if that's the easiest way to coordinate. And we're available to then come back and pick up signed petitions when they're ready to be submitted. Next slide, please. So in addition to engaging residents of affordable housing properties, right, we're also thinking about our member organizations and individual members that may not have residents to engage, thinking of individual advocates, folks at fellow advocacy organizations, architects, lenders, et cetera. Your help would still be very much appreciated, for example, by circulating a petition within your office. Similar to engaging residents, SCANPH staff can train a member of your team to collect signatures from colleagues. SCANPH staff are also available to visit your office and be on hand to answer questions from anybody that would like to sign. One option is to invite our staff to present at a staff meeting or event and collect signatures afterward. As Talk and Alan were mentioning earlier, that's one thing that we'll be doing at their upcoming and really exciting Budokan opening in a couple of weeks. For instance, LA Family Housing, we're confirmed to present at a staff meeting next week and then collect signatures after that. Another example at Venice Community Housing, they're hosting an external advocacy committee meeting next week, where we'll be engaging with folks that are both not on their staff and not on their residents, but connected as individual advocates, talk with them about the campaign and ask them to sign the petition afterwards. You can also help by carrying a petition with you. So bring it with you next time you're out to lunch, to coffee, hanging out with friends, going to an event, going to church, wherever you are, carry that clipboard with you and get your friends, folks that you already have relationships with, to sign the petition. You know, we've all got our own networks of personal relationships that we can lend to this campaign to spread the word and really invest in the campaign both professionally and personally. And finally, another great option, especially for folks that might not live in the city of LA, but have some time you want to lend to support the campaign, would be to show up for an upcoming canvassing event. These are held in neighborhoods all over the city, and they can be a really fun way to see the city in a new way by walking the block, talking with voters, and spreading the word about this important solution to what I think we can all agree is our city's most pressing challenge right now. Next slide, please. So if you're ready to grab a clipboard, we've got events coming up this coming Saturday at 9 a.m., which I believe is going to be hosted by Sage in South LA, but working on confirming that. And then every other Saturday at 9 a.m. after that. So March 19th, April 2nd, April 16th. If you'd like to get involved, send me an email. My address is right here on the slide, and I'd be glad to get you plugged in. Next slide, please. And some great news for all of us working at nonprofit organizations, which might actually be everybody on this call. You might be unsure of what you can legally do without jeopardizing the 501, cherished 501c3 tax-exempt status of your employer. The good news is that in addition to voter registration drives, direct advocacy with your elected officials, and taking positions on pieces of legislation, you can take a position on a ballot initiative. You would not want to take a position on a candidate for elected office as a 501c3, but ballot initiatives are fair game. Up to generous limits allowed under IRS guidelines, generous limits that are going to be more than sufficient for most of us and plenty to make a big difference in this campaign. And by extension, IRS regulations that govern tax-exempt status of nonprofit orgs do allow for staff time to be used for advocacy work. Of course, one major exception that might affect folks on this call would be in the cases where a staff person's salary is funded completely by a government grant. That individual might not be able to do advocacy during their work time, but if even a portion of their staff time, their salary is paid by not funded publicly, so for instance, by private philanthropy, or if they're compensated in another way for work they contribute outside of their usual hours, then that person might be able to do advocacy work. In any case, of course, we're all people outside of our jobs, so we all have the capacity to do political work outside of our day jobs. And so, of course, that would include choosing as an individual, if you live in LA and are registered to vote here, to sign the petition. That would include taking a copy of the petition with you wherever you are, with engaging with your neighbors or your friends. And that would include knocking doors with us on an upcoming Saturday morning. For more information and for some case-by-case technical assistance on this, there are two orgs that I include here at the bottom of this page, Boulder Advocacy and Nonprofit Vote. They're both excellent national organizations and very good resources for all of us on this topic in the nonprofit space. Can I get the next slide, please? So finally, I want to express a big thank you from all of us at SCANPH and the United to House LA campaign to these SCANPH member organizations that are already actively working with us to collect ballot petition signatures from staff and residents and volunteers, community events. So that'd be Abode Communities, Community of Friends, Barker Management, Clifford Beers Housing, East LA Community Corp, Hollywood Community Housing, John Stewart Company, LA Family Housing, Little Tokyo Service Center, Mersing Housing, and Venice Community Housing. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate your commitment and hope that everyone on this call will be able to join us in some way very soon. That is it for me, and I think I'll pass it back over to Alan now.
One quick thing I wanted to mention before we went over to Alan is that I forgot to do this earlier, but the Residents United network that SCANPH operates has also supported this initiative, and the run members are actually going into their buildings and collecting signatures as well. So I'm really proud of the Residents United network, and we actually had some run members turn out over the weekend to collect signatures. So for those folks that are in affordable housing that tuned in today, thank you for all you're doing and all that you will do. We appreciate you.
Terrific. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, James. Some really important information there, and hope that folks will take advantage of the opportunity to get involved. We are now, as the sign says, ready for questions and answers. I saw a couple that came in during the presentation. There was one from Will Wright at the Association of Architects. And Will knows that I love him. It had a slightly of a rant bent to it, which was, what are we going to do about fixing the city's dysfunction? Kind of regulatory barriers and other kind of obstacles that the city puts in its own way, or in the way of developers as we try to work to get things built. And I would answer that in two ways. One is this initiative doesn't necessarily seek to fix all the issues in the city. But I do think that it has a really robust component to it that has to do with active, coordinated, and well-funded oversight. So there's as Laura Raymond pointed out, there is a Citizens Oversight Board that is getting a portion of the administrative funds generated by the fee. And that those funds help support a professional staff to facilitate the work of the oversight committee. So there's an inspector general that will look at not only the real estate market overall, but also the performance of the program, both backward looking and forward looking. And then we've embedded into the initiative something that we call delegated authority, essentially taking some of the decision-making power, not all, but some of the decision-making power that City Council has, and try to depoliticize that by housing that authority within the Housing Department. So the Housing Department is, under the terms of this initiative, delegated the responsibility to create the RFP based on the Citizens Oversight Committee funding priorities, to issue that RFP, to determine the winners of that RFP, to make funding commitments and actually to fund those commitments, all without City Council participation. And so we've taken out a handful of visits to City Hall as you go through the process of trying to get your development approved. There was a second question I saw from Nina, which is really a clarification. Nina Dooley from Link, asking about who's eligible to sign a petition. And just to confirm, you need to be a registered voter in the city of Los Angeles to be a qualified signee of a petition. And but anybody can contribute financially, and anybody can contribute their time and work to get valid signatures. As we give the folks on the line a chance to consider other questions, is there anybody on the panel who had something occur to them that they thought we should be talking about that we missed out on in the presentations? All right. So I know James, would you do me a favor? Would you put and Chris both, will you guys put your email address in the chat? I'm going to stall for a little bit of time. If you're on the line and you're interested in any way in participating in the signature gathering work, Chris and James are your guys. Please contact them and let's figure out a way to get you to work. It's been really an interesting experience in that I've talked to a number of people about not only fundraising, but also signature gathering. And so, for example, there was a small architecture firm that said to me, gosh, you know, I only have a handful of employees, but in our ground floor, we have a vegan restaurant. And there's nothing but liberals that come in and out of that place. And I bet if we put a petition there, we'd get a bunch of signatures. And so, you know, there's all sorts of interesting notions about ways to get this thing done. And so there are no bad ideas. We welcome them all. Please feel free to share those with Chris and James. All right. All right, and then Laura, there's a volunteer day on this coming Saturday at Sage. Please go to that link to find the registration to sign up there. It is both a hoot and a holler to go out and get petitions signed. You never can tell who you're going to end up having a really interesting conversation with. Our experience was people were either going to sign or they weren't. And it had less to do with the details in Article 7, Section 4 than it did with whether they were predisposed to sign petitions at all. Or the other issue was when we said we're talking about putting an initiative on the ballot to raise money to build housing to house low-income people, almost immediately a yes. And so that was very exciting. There's Laura Raymond with another sign-up sheet for March 19th. The building trades are going to be coordinating that, and the sign-up form is there. Jeanette wants me to wrap up. Now's my chance. Let's see. Oh, 1031 exchanges. I don't know the answer to that, Will Wright, but I'll work on it. All right. Since Jeanette said we have to close, that means we have to close. We all know who the boss is. Thank you so much to the SCANPH staff, Ariana, Chris, and James. Thanks to Laura Raymond, TAKAO SUZUKI, and Robin Hughes, so much for your time and energy on this. Everybody have a great day, and we'll see you out there on the petition drive.